Ron here with the Perfectly Imperfect Marriage, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about identity. Now, normally Samantha and I would be sitting here together having this conversation, but unfortunately she's feeling a little under the weather, but she'll be back with us for the next video. And when we coach, we include identity and values together, as the two are truly interwoven. Now, we're going to break this down into some bite-sized pieces. So we're going to do a few videos on identity, a few videos on values, and then bring them all together. But I want to start with our logo. You know, the bottom of that, it says, anchored in love and guided by the King. We absolutely believe that, 100%, guided by the King. Your identity was knitted in the womb. You are a child of the Most High God. The world doesn't want you to believe that. You know, we are bombarded with so much information, so many concepts, theories, ideas on who you should be and how to get there and what you need to do and what you need to be, you know, and it's easy to get lost in this. You know, it's easy to begin to believe what culture is trying to tell you should believe. You are a child of the Most High God. That is your identity. Own it. Your role is not your identity. And this one's really easy to get stuck in, you know? Your role as a dad, your role as a mom, your role as a husband, your role as a wife, your role at work, your job, your career, these are not your identity. You know, when somebody asks who you are, we often say, you know, I'm a corporate recruiter or I'm a salesman or, you know, whatever it is. That's not who you are. It's what you do. And the two, they blend, but they're not the same. Own who you are. You are a child of the Most High God. That's where your identity needs to be. Past wounds. Your identity is certainly not in your past wounds or infractions that have been done against you. And unfortunately, it's easy to fall into that trap too. So yes, we're going to acknowledge the pain. You know, if you've spent any time here on this earth, odds are you've walked through a fire or two. You know, you've gone through some pains, but your pains don't identify you. They are not your identity. There's a song, and one of the lyrics is "Scars come with living," you know, and it's 100% true. But the scars are not your identity; they're something that you experienced. And then, you know, the lies that maybe you heard when you were growing up. You know, lies that you heard, or maybe even now in your professional life. You know, you're not good enough. You're never going to amount to anything. You're bad. You know, these things that we have heard and possibly heard multiple times. You know, we begin to ruminate on these things. We begin to think about these things in a negative light for too long, and we begin to somehow skew our mind to think that this is our identity, and it's not. Again, you're a child of the Most High God. Own that. Walk in that. Now, that doesn't mean that life's going to be easy and that maybe we don't need to reevaluate some things as far as our thinking patterns go, but you know, we're not going to get too deep into the gobbledygook here. So there's a individual I like to listen to on YouTube, and he's got a Bible study, and he also does some other talks. But I was listening to one of his Bible studies a few weeks back, and he was looking at what Moses was talking to God, this obviously back in Genesis. And Moses had just spent 40 years in the desert, and he's talking to the burning bush, and which is God. And God's telling him, you know, go talk to Pharaoh and free my people. And Moses, first off, is like, yeah, man, I'm not the right guy. You don't want me to do that. I don't want to go do that. But after they kind of worked through that, Moses asked God, who sent me? What's your name? Who is sending me? And God says, I am who I am. God's telling you his name is I am. Think about that for a minute. How often do we say things like, I am not enough. I am not pretty enough. I am not handsome enough. I am not skilled enough. I am not smart enough. Stop doing that. Stop taking the Lord's name, I am, and following it with a negative who you are. I am a child of God, period. That's it. That's who you are. Now, all of the other experiences, have some influence, and, we're going to, like I said, we're going to go a little deeper into some of this stuff. This is just a 10,000 foot overview of some of the key points when it comes to identity. Don't let culture try to shape your identity, because culture is trying to. You know, are you, trying to keep up with the Joneses, looking at Facebook and chasing the next fad or the next whatever? Or, are you trying to, your house, your car, your clothes, you're investing, believing that your identity is wrapped up in those things versus who you are, and it's easy to get stuck in this trap. I'm not saying that if you are, that's unusual, but acknowledge it, see it, understand it. And, the goal here is to simply understand where our identity comes from. I was recently talking with somebody about midlife crisis, and, myself, some of my friends and peers, we're getting a little older. And some of these things, people will think about, maybe even ruminate on too much, meditate on the negative. But so I'm having a conversation with a friend, and he's talking about midlife crisis, and he thinks he might be approaching a midlife crisis. And, I had to push back on that. Like, I don't believe that we have midlife crises. We have identity crises. If you're having a perceived midlife crisis, realistically, you just put your identity and attached it to your role, whether it's your career, whether it's parenting, and now you're ready for retirement, or the kids are moving out and you're an empty nester. And your identity has been so wrapped up in that role for so long that when the role is changing, you're confused. When our identity is based on who you are in Christ, we're building on a rock, a solid foundation. When your identity is based on your role or what culture is trying to tell you to believe about yourself, that's shaky sand. That's going to shift on a regular basis. And when that shift happens, you feel it on the inside. You're like, man, something's wrong. Something's not, I don't feel right. I'm confused, maybe getting a little anxious, a little angry. I would argue that this is about identity, not midlife crisis. And when we really begin to wrap our heads around this and change how we think about these things, I'm telling you, it's a game changer. It's a game changer for you personally, and it's a game changer for your relationship. When it comes to showing up in your marriage, knowing who you are and understanding that it's not attached to your role is going to make your relationship more authentic. You're showing up the way that you need to for your spouse. And when you understand that identity and values are so interwoven, once we get to a point where we know our identity and we know our values, it really makes decision-making processes much easier. It makes behavior patterns more understandable and easier to walk out. I'm telling you, like, this information, and like I said, this is just a 10,000 foot overview. We can really peel some layers off of this onion, and we're going to. But I just want you to understand that, if you're starting to feel maybe a little lost, or that you're running into this perceived midlife crisis, or that somehow the ground under you is not as solid as you thought it was or you think it should be. Let's talk about identity and reevaluating identity and really getting to the core. I'm telling you, when we truly identify identity and who we are, a child of the Most High God, as well as our values, our personal values, our marriage values, we understand how identity influences our values. This is a game changer for your marriage. This is a game changer for your relationship. And if, it's really going to ripple through every aspect of your life. So I'm going to end here. I mean, I could absolutely ramble on about this for hours, really. This is stuff that I'm really, really passionate about. But I want you to know that if you're struggling with some things, you're not alone. You can reach out to us. If you've got a church family, reach out to your church family. There's help. There are people who, are trained and can help guide you and walk through this. But our goal, Samantha and I, here at A Perfectly Imperfect Marriage, I mean, it's in the name. Marriage is perfectly imperfect, but so are we as individuals. I know that I'm a child of the Most High God, but walking that out on a daily basis is sometimes hard. We get it. But the goal here is to understand, change some behavior patterns, and then maybe equip with some tools that make it easier to do this on a daily basis. But we just want you to know that you're not alone. Anchored in love, guided by the King. Until next time, take care.